Good morning. Just checking in. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Just give me a thumbs up. Let me know if you can hear me, and then we'll get started. Great. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate it. Just getting this off. Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and begin. You can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. All right, putting the palms down. So good morning, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Nice to be with you. Let's see, question for you all. I always like to start with a question just to give you an opportunity to share and give a little time before we start meditation practice. How about, let's look at the paramitas, the 6 perfections, the Bodhisattva practice of generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. So if we look at those 6, what are you struggling with the most right now? Generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. What are you struggling with the most right now? If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. You'll see a chat box there somewhere on your screen. And feel free to type in your response. I'll share it here. Let's see. Of the 6 paramitas, generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. What are you struggling with the most right now? Of the 6 paramitas, generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom, what are you struggling with the most right now? So feel free to share as little or as much as you'd like. As always, there's no right answers or wrong answers. These are just opportunities to share and express a little bit about your practice. So I'm looking at these things really as a way of life. I've shared them for many years in many different ways, but one of the things I will often suggest people do is to take one of them and maybe just spend a week practicing that. All 6 really have opportunities to play out in our life every day, sometimes better than other times. But if you look at what you're struggling with right now, then, maybe commit this next week to say, okay, this next week I'm going to concentrate on concentration. I just looked at Cynthia's concentration. So that as an example, then if that's the current struggle as an example, then the practice would be to focus on, okay, this week from Saturday to Saturday, I'm going to maybe increase my effort and amount of time I spend doing a meditation practice. If your struggle is patience, which a couple of you have listed, then you're going to focus from this week to next week on sitting with situations that you really lack patience, and almost putting yourself in situations where you lack patience and learning to be present with it. So again, all 6 really are beautiful practices to just live by. But sometimes it's a lot to hold each moment. So, simplify it a little bit. Just pick one. Let's see some responses here. Molly, patience, always. Roberto, good morning, everyone. I'm not the most patient person at the moment. Well, we'll get back to in another moment when you are more patient. Marisa, wow, we're 3 for 3. Patience. So maybe Molly, Roberto, Marisa, Brian, Linda. Oh my goodness. Gurgel. Yeah, a lot of patience. Struggle with patience. Let's see. Cynthia, concentration. Brian, patience always. Linda, patience. Jim, diligence, especially with meditation practice. It's easy to be too tired or too busy. Definitely. Bill, diligence. Gurgel, patience with my friend Pain, who keeps trying to get my attention. Yeah, that pain is always a struggle. Bridget, I'm diligent for a bit, then slip and fall into old habits. I feel like I'm constantly starting over. Well, on that note, the constantly starting over, the good news, and I'm just kind of referencing the Suzuki book, Zen Mind, Beginner Mind. Our entire life is constantly starting over every moment. So I understand the intention, I think with what you share about I'm diligent and then slip away and I keep starting over. But we're actually starting over every moment with everything we do. So it's important not to, to try not to, as you share, be diligent. And then when you say you're slipping away and then you're starting over, to recognize that's the process. So as long as you can do that without being angry and frustrated at yourself, that's important as well. So every moment starting over as if you've never experienced that before, because that's really the way it is. Each moment we are experiencing it for the first time. So anything else anybody wants to share before we sit? And these are things that, there's not always answers or solutions that are simple to questions, or not that you've asked questions, but if you're struggling with patience, a question could be, how do I practice patience? And sometimes there's not always simple, quick, easy answers, but the recognition of it is really where you start. So for me, I like to really kind of challenge people to ask themselves, where am I struggling with my practice? And then you'll know where to focus on. So, all right, anything else before we sit? All right, so a couple things to tell you before we begin the meditation, especially for those who are new. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. I mean, you don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit and breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. I'll guide us as we begin, and we will settle into a little bit of silence. Most important is not to expect anything from this. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continuing this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought. Return to breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Breathing in. Follow breath in. Breathing out. Follow breath out. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. And ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with anything I said. It's not from how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's not from the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than anyone else who began to understand why we suffer, why we get angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen and you react. More stuff happens, more reaction. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. For most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, and focused. Distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. But meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else. And that's it. I really try not to complicate this practice. It's simply taking time each day to slow down and breathe. When we do that, we become aware of our thoughts, and we train ourselves to do that throughout our day. So as your thoughts arise throughout the day, whether it's joy or sorrow, happiness, anger, sadness, excitement, whatever the range of thoughts and emotions that arise during the day, it's to understand the impermanence of all of them. They're all just passing emotions and thoughts, moment to moment experience of the present moment, which changes every moment. So to cling or attach to any of them is meaningless, worthless. Does you no good. It's just an experience of that present moment. Good moods turn into bad moods turn into good moods. Headaches go away, headaches come back. Anger arises and falls. Happiness arises and falls. This is our life. The challenge is when you find yourself in one of these emotions or thoughts and you continue to expand it, and you take one bad moment or one bad day and you tell yourself that's your entire life, when it's not. It's just that moment. So with that, I'll pause. As always, I prefer to respond to questions that you may have, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. So feel free to, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. There's a chat box there on your screen. Feel free just to type in questions around meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And I'll take the next 15 minutes or so to address your questions. If the objective of enlightenment is to break the cycle of rebirth, with each turning of the wheel, are we not deprived of the best examples of humanity? So there's a lot in that question there. The objective of enlightenment is to break the cycle of rebirth. With each turning of the wheel, are we not deprived of the best examples of humanity? So there is trying to just ponder. Well, let me just ramble for a few. It's usually the best way. First of all, the objective, enlightenment doesn't mean you have broken the cycle of rebirth. Let me start there. So again, enlightenment does not mean that you have broken the cycle of rebirth. Specifically, for example, bodhisattvas, which are considered fully enlightened beings, their vow is to be reborn life after life. So they actually make the choice to come back. All right, you look at the Dalai Lama, for example, which is, we have currently the 14th Dalai Lama. And so this has been a continuation of consciousness, of karma, of rebirth of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, Avalokiteshvara, who they say the Dalai Lama is the literal rebirth of Kuan Yin Bodhisattva. And each time, life after life, chooses to come back. That is the teaching, and very specifically the vow of the Bodhisattva, is to be reborn life after life to liberate all sentient beings from suffering. So when you start with that understanding and then you look at the question, breaking the cycle of rebirth is one thing, but it's not contingent solely upon enlightenment, right? There's the 12 links of dependent origination, and that's really, I would suggest exploring that a little bit as far as breaking the cycle of rebirth. But really the second part is, I think, knowing you a little bit, I understand where you're going with the whole, are we not deprived of the best examples of humanity? In the same hand, in the same way you could say, well, I want to be reborn just so I can see the greatness of humanity. But you could also say, I want to be reborn to see the all the pain and suffering in the world. So I wouldn't suggest looking at rebirth as a thing that we're trying to justify why we should or shouldn't be reborn. Because very often, and I'm not suggesting you, Brian, I'm just saying this in general, very often when this topic or question comes up or gets discussed or is shared, people will say, well, I want to be reborn because I want to continue to experience life. And therefore, I'm not going to practice or work on awakening because I just want to be reborn. Well, I don't suggest that as a healthy view. First of all, what's reborn is not you anyways. It's a continuation of your consciousness just as it was before. So often the mistake we make is, for example, Brian, you could say, well, I'm Brian, this is my life, and this Buddhist awakening stuff is cool, but I'd rather be reborn so I can see more great things of humanity. Well, what you may be losing sight of is the fact that you're just, as Brian, you're just one tiny little blip on your endless stream of consciousness. So what you call Brian has been many other physical forms for endless time. But as humans, I shouldn't say we only, people tend to, or often will just say, well, I'm going to start here. I'm Jeff. So what's my next life going to be like? And they're not realizing that your life right now, Brian, is your next life from the past life consciousness. And that past life consciousness was the next life from the previous past life consciousness. So it helps to look at it that way. As opposed to, I'm Brian or I'm Jeff and I'm going to choose what's next. Because the truth is your consciousness, your karma has already really dictated a lot of that anyways. So, yeah, I don't know. Hope that's helpful. Molly, as a Buddhist, how do you respond to people who choose not to get vaccinated? I'm struggling with accepting that as an acceptable and compassionate choice. Yeah, it's a great question, but I mean, really, this question, as a Buddhist, how do you respond to people who choose not to? You could just put fill in the blank. Or, yeah, you could just put a blank and let people fill it in, right? I mean, as a Buddhist, or as a Christian, or as a Catholic, or as a Jewish person, or as a Muslim, or a pagan, or whatever you are, people are going to choose to do what they want, right? So, as a Buddhist, how am I going to respond to people who are mean to each other? How am I going to respond to people who kill each other? How am I going to respond to people who rape each other? How am I going to respond to people who are kind and loving to each other, right? The answer to that question, and you know me, very rarely do I give answers, but the answer to that question is the same, which is with endless compassion and understanding that each individual has their own choice to do everything. Now, it's very easy for one person to say that because they're not doing this, they lack compassion. But I know a lot of people who, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, good or bad, either way, but I know a lot of people who've chosen for their own reasons to not get vaccinated. And these people who I know are also very compassionate people. So I can't pass this blanket judgment on someone and say, just me personally, and say, well, because you've chosen that, that means you're not a compassionate person, or that that's not an acceptable choice. Their choice to do whatever they want is no different than your choice to do whatever you want. Now, this is not easy, but it's really just the, it's the latest, most present, one of the latest, most present, pressing questions, philosophical debates, curiosities, which is people's choice to get vaccinated. People have a choice every single day to do what they want. That's what makes us individuals, humans. And the truth of the matter is, even if I'm just looking at the language here, I'm struggling with accepting that as a acceptable and compassionate choice. So here's the hard part, Molly. For me, your question is as a Buddhist, right? So my response to that part of your statement is, as a practitioner of the Buddhist teachings, it's not my place to deem what other people do as acceptable or not acceptable. It's not my choice, it's theirs. Right? So my role is to try to understand why people do what they do. It doesn't mean I have to like it, agree with it, or choose to do it in my own way. But it's not my choice, it's theirs. Right? People eat what they want. They see movies that's a bad example. People eat what they want usually, right? They vote for who they want. They choose to have abortions or not if they want. They choose to accept people in the LGBTQ community or not if they want. All of these huge human rights issues are individual choices. And it's not easy to, as you say, accept their choices, but they're also potentially looking at you and saying, I can't believe she would get vaccinated. And they have their reasons for that. And they believe those reasons. Right? So I think it helps for me personally to just abandon this idea that because I practice Buddhist teachings and I focus on trying to cultivate wisdom and compassion, and I integrate the paramitas into my life every day and practice them, it's helpful for me, Jeff, to remember that just because I practice and work on all these things does not make me any better of a person than anybody else. It does not make me any more right than anybody else. It's just my path and my practice. And the Buddhist teachings is to go beyond judgment. So If we stop judging others, then this idea of having to accept it as a compassionate choice or not goes away. Because our acceptance of it or not doesn't really matter. So, good question. Hope that's Brian, thanks. You're welcome. Molly, yes. Helpful. But this is life or death issue for humanity, and we put healthcare workers at risk. I'm struggling to accept that. Oh, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not saying it's not a life or death issue. I'm not saying we're not putting healthcare workers at risk. But like I said, it's no different in many ways to all the other issues that arise. People choose to do what they want. There's no simple answer or solution to this. One may think, well, just get vaccinated and everything will be fine. But to the millions and millions of people who don't think that way, then it's not okay. Right? I think racism is a life or death issue for humanity. Absolutely 100%. It puts the lives of people of color at greater risk. When we live in a world that is filled with anger, hatred, racism, people of color are at greater risk. People are making a choice to be racist. And this is what I mean when I say I see very similar, when I say fill in the blank, it's a similar response really to all of these issues. And yes, there's a but to, everything. But what about this? But what about that? But what about this? Drinking and driving is a life or death issue for humanity. I don't know the statistics. I haven't looked at them in years, so I'm not even that someone here might. But the number of people that are killed by drunk drivers is a life or death issue for humanity. And yet people still choose to get intoxicated and get behind the wheel. So I just would caution thinking that this is the only life or death issue for humanity. It's one of, and the most pressing one because of the pandemic. And I get it. I mean, I personally probably have very similar, if not the same views personally as you do. And I'm personally a fan of getting vaccinated and wished everybody would. But I'm not going to pass judgment on those who don't. And I'm not going to outcast those who don't. That's their choice. So it's tough. Cynthia, can I just say I'm tired of all of it? Yeah, you can say that. Everything, craving kindness, I know therein lies my challenge. Yeah, I mean, it is very challenging. And, like I said, look, especially, a lot of you, when I see your names here, I've been sitting with all of you for years, right? People's individual anger and frustration and sadness and misery and depression and judgment and all of these types of things didn't just occur because we've had a pandemic for the last 15 months, right? We've all been around the Dharma Bum Temple and Buddhist practice well before the pandemic existed. So the pandemic is just, like I said, it's the latest thing for us to be challenged with, to push our buttons, to force us deeper into a practice, to require a greater level of compassion and understanding. And as time goes and this pandemic continues to hopefully trend in the right direction, and evolve and take, change shapes and all the kinds of stuff that it's going to do. Down the road, there will be more things. There will be the next thing. It has been for endless time, and it will be. But the practice, and that's to me what I love so much about the Buddha's teachings, he taught this stuff 2,500 years ago, and it applies to everything, every day, every moment, and every situation. We can't say, well, you can say whatever you want, but as a practitioner, I don't say, well, here's the Buddhist teachings, but over here are issues of racism and a pandemic and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm going to deal with all that, but I'm going to keep my Buddhist practice over here. The practice is to bring, and this is really the nature of your original question, Molly, is as a Buddhist, how do you respond? The practice is to bring everything you look at and explore in Buddhist teachings into each moment. And the reason I rattle off those things earlier, and I'll kind of close with this thought, but I've spent I started 25 years ago working in populations with people who've been physically, sexually, emotionally abused. Since that time, for the last 18 years, not so much on a daily basis now, but on a daily to weekly basis, I've worked with people who have murdered. I've worked with people who have raped. I've worked with people who have committed tremendous trauma and pain and suffering on others' lives. And I've worked with people who have been the recipient of that tremendous pain and trauma. And so for me as a practitioner, Buddhism has been a lifesaver because it has allowed me to understand that each person has their own unique experience with life. And a lot of people do incredibly horrific and tragic things that are disgusting and not fun to observe or be present with. But it's the reality of our existence. And so my role as a practitioner is to not be with them in judgment, but to listen to them, to understand why do people do what they do. I have seen people's lives drastically changed that have done horrific things. It doesn't excuse or make okay or change what they did at all. But I've seen people's lives change. And all of these experiences, for me personally, tied into Buddhist practice, has made it so much easier to not judge people for anything they choose to do. And not easy, of course. None of this is. But as we say, it's a practice. It's a practice of patience. And, however much time it takes for all of this to pass and get behind us, whether it's a month or 10 years, whatever it is, we have no idea, maybe never, we don't know. But I promise there will be the next thing. And everyone will be focusing on that. And the same responses will apply. So with that, I'm going to close. Great questions. I appreciate it. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Duke during his time of rebirth, and to Travis and Candace and Tony during their time of suffering. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up the temple 14 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. We have been closed for about 15 months. We will be reopening pretty soon. Keep your eyes and ears open to newsletters and Facebook, Instagram posts on any announcements that will be coming out very soon. Those of us who lead, we're not monks or nuns, we're not gurus or teachers, we're just practitioners. We take our unenlightened view of Buddhist teachings, and we share it with other unenlightened folks. No offense to any of the enlightened people that are with us today. All our classes have gone virtual in the last 15 months. When we reopen, some will be in person, some will be virtual, some may be both. I don't have any answers to that. And even when we start, that will always be up in the air and forever changing as we figure things out. So continue to be patient with us as we try to work through, what the next phase of a opening of the temple looks like. What else? I think that's about it. Thanks for being here again, and please be safe, be well, and do whatever you can to make sure you don't put anyone else at risk. To me, that is the Bodhisattva practice. It is the practice of kindness, but remember, it's not the practice that everybody chooses, and they have every right to choose their own practice and path. So thank you all.